Hey everyone, it's Blake with FicheBait. In this video, I'm going to walk through the new features in the Forms 12 Spring 2025 release. This includes things like saved to repository system profiles and testing enhancements. Let's take a look. Alright, so the first new feature that we're going to look at is the saved to repository system profiles and forms. So if you recall, if you go to a saved to repository task within the process diagram, and you come in over on the right hand side and you would set up a profile to connect to the repository. So you can see here I have a profile called Laser Repository, and after we set that up, we would come down here and we would select where it needs to be saved to, the metadata information, how to name the file, all that kind of stuff. But you would have to do this per forms process or per saved to repository task, even if it was in the same forms process. So it became kind of a hassle to keep track of those, especially if you ever needed to update them for any reason. So in this release, Laserfiche has come out with system repository profiles. So if you go to the administration page, I've already got it open, and on the left-hand side, go to Repository Profiles. You will now see two tabs. The first one is System Repository Profiles, and the second one is Process Repository Profiles. So we'll start on the Process Repository Profiles, and you can see a list of different repository profiles that have been configured per process that we have. And if we scroll to the right, you can see this, if any of them are connected to any steps. You can see the process that they're associated with. We can click on that. It will open up the process as well. And so it gives us all the information about what's going on with these process repository profiles. And then if we go over to system repository profiles, you can see first off in the top right, we can create a new repository profile. You just click on the button, give it a name, tell it the repository server that you want to connect to, the repository, and then a username and password. So this is basically the same thing that you were doing before within the process diagram when you would go to create a repository profile. So you'd enter all that information in, click verify and save, and then it will add it to this list. So if we went back to our process diagram, since I already have that set up, you can see in my drop down for repository profile, I have system repository profiles and business repository, process repository profiles. So one of the nice things that they've done is if you have process repository profiles already saved, you can migrate them over to your system repository profiles. So again, you would want to come in and create your system repository profiles first. And then in the process repository profiles, if I select one of these that doesn't have any steps, so if I select this first one and I click on this migrate button, it will come up and say, hey, there's no profiles, there's no processes associated with this profile, so there's no reason to do a migration of it. Right? It would actually be better to delete it, and you can do that by clicking on the delete button. It'll get rid of it. But if you do have processes associated with a profile like this one, you can see I have one selected here, and we click the migrate button. Now we get a little bit of a wizard to walk through. So the first thing that it's going to ask is to select the system profile to replace the process profiles being migrated. So we're going to choose Laser Repository, and you can see the information about that profile that's been configured. And then it'll say the process profiles to be migrated, which is the same name. I did name it the same, which you will probably end up doing with your system as well. So we have Laser Repository, and then financial aid as the process. And we would click migrate. I've already done that, and that's how I got this one here. So if I click on this one, it's basically kind of like a lot of the other system settings here. You can see the repository server, the repository username, is it using TLS? And then you can see the processes that are associated along with the steps, as well as access rights. So that's a pretty cool feature. This will help you centralize all your repository profiles because, like I said before, you're doing it per process. You're having to manage all those, and as your processes grew, if you ever had to change usernames or passwords that were going to be associated with that, you'd have to go in and touch every single one of them. So this makes everything centralized, allows you to administer those a lot easier than what you used to be able to do. All right. One of the other things that was introduced in the initial version 12 release is the ability to test a process. So if we come up here, we have a test process button, and you can go through and you can set up different process test rules and everything. So you can have it assigned to someone rather than a normal end user. Maybe you want to assign it to yourself every time or send emails to yourself and all that. And I'm not going to cover how to do all that in this video because we've talked about it in a previous video when that was released. But all that has been available in Forms now for a little while. What's been missing is in workflow. If you are kicking workflows off from Forms, or you need workflow to kick off a Forms process, it wasn't able to run in a test mode or kick a Forms process off starting in test mode. Those have now been added to workflow. I actually have another video about that as well, so take a look at that video if you want to see how all that works. But essentially, when a Forms process is run as test, workflow will now receive a token to indicate the test status. And so you can have branches in your conditional decisions and things to check to see if the Forms process is running in test, and then go down a specific branch that does different things than what you normally would do in the production environment. And then the second part of that was Forms processes can now be invoked in test mode from a workflow using their existing test rules. So that's pretty cool as well. I actually have a lot of different processes, Forms processes that kicked off from workflow. And so now we can initiate that into a test mode if we need to. And those were the main features that were released with the spring 2025 release. There were a lot of other things that were included with it, a lot of accessibility fixes. Some other minor features that were included is the multi-server configuration utility now supports wildcard certificates. They expanded header security tokens to the Forms notification service, a few minor UI improvements to the reporting page, support for custom HTML when setting field values programmatically through lfform.setFieldValues, a good handful of design fixes, and quite a few additional fixes on top of that. So hopefully this gives you a good idea of what's included in that spring 2025 release for Forms. Definitely some welcome changes. We like seeing all the improvements that are coming down the pipe for Forms with every release that we get. But hopefully you've enjoyed this video, and if you have, give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and as always, keep fishing.